food safety culture means how deeply your values, your beliefs and behaviors are integrated in your organization, how deeply you believe in food safety, not just practice your compliance standards, but the core principle that guides the action of every employee in an organization. They really have to believe in food safety culture. This is our culture. I'm doing this not just because my boss or my standard operating procedure tells me to, but I'm doing this because I really believe this food can be eaten by my own kids, either my friends or myself. So that's how the food safety culture becomes so important.
You're listening to Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork, a podcast discussing the latest trends and technologies in the food and supplements industries, brought to you by Trustwell, featuring conversations with regulatory experts, quality and safety champions, and thought leaders across the industry. I'm your host, Lydia Adams, VP of Marketing at Trustwell. If you're loving the conversation, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned to the end of the episode where you'll hear our guests tell us their key food industry predictions for 2025. All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to Food Tech Talks, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork. Today, we're delighted to welcome Dinesh Babu. Dinesh is a seasoned food safety and quality assurance leader with extensive experience in fresh produce, food manufacturing, and compliance. As Vice President of Quality and Food Safety at State Garden, he has been at the forefront of implementing robust food safety cultures, sanitation programs, and regulatory compliance strategies. With leadership roles at Revel Greens, Grimway Farms, Del Monte, and Earthbound Farm, Dinesh has developed and overseen comprehensive food safety systems while navigating the challenges of large-scale fresh food production. His expertise spans HACCP, GFSI, and regulatory compliance, making him a key voice in advancing food safety and sustainability around the world. Welcome, Dinesh.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here today. I really just like to kind of start the conversation with really what got you into this field in the first place and how has it evolved from there?
Food safety, food science itself is a very interesting field. A lot of things are possible in food science, whether it is industry, academics, research, production, industrial environment. When I was a graduate student in Oklahoma State University, there was an outbreak that happened with the spinach. There was a lot of issues with that and some death as well. And that got me intrigued. When that outbreak happened, I was actually doing my master's in soil microbiology and biochemistry. And microbiology was my background right from my undergrad. My undergrad was in agriculture. And microbiology was my major. And then this issue that happened was microbial nature, right? So then I thought it should not be that difficult to understand this, why it is happening, and thereby prevent it. So I went and met a professor who was Dr. Peter Muyana in Oklahoma State. He's a very well-accomplished scientist in food microbiology. I approached him and said, I want to do my PhD in food microbiology. He had a project on food toxicology, detection of toxins, and then I worked with him, and that's how I got interested in food safety. And then as I got deeper into food safety, I saw that prevention of foodborne outbreaks is not that simple because of so many things that come across on this. That's why I thought I will pursue a career in food safety.
That's interesting that happened kind of while you were in your program. And I can see that like moving forward in the companies that you've obviously worked with some of the biggest names in the industry, especially with fresh produce and fresh food. What are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned along the way?
Fresh food, like you mentioned, is so important. And there are so many companies that produce millions and millions of pounds of product on a daily basis. That means so many people eat that. And it's very important for food safety. One minor mistake can lead to a disastrous effects. And that's what is more interesting and more valuable in food safety. Everybody in any industry, in any food, whether it is fresh produce or not, has to work in tandem with how food safety has to be held and how you have to maintain a food safety standards. So that's a key thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that we're going to talk about this next topic because I think it's really important. So you've obviously seen kind of everything, right? So how does a strong food safety culture play into that need that we all have to make our food safer? And what are the key drivers that you've seen that really improve that food safety culture?
As a food safety professionals, we are good in implementing food safety standards. But when it comes to food safety culture, how do you make sure that is implemented in your company is not that easy because it involves humans. So my major understanding of food safety culture and some training I received when I attended a workshop with Dr. Frank Yanis, who was former FDA commissioner He conducts every year the food safety culture workshop, and then I attended one of that, and then I understood much more deeply how food safety culture is very important. Most of us know that food safety culture means how deeply your values, your beliefs, and behaviors are integrated in your organization. How deeply you believe in food safety, not just practice your compliance standards, but the core principle that guides the action of every employee in an organization. They really have to believe in food safety culture. This is our culture. I'm doing this not just because my boss or my standard operating procedure tells me to, but I'm doing this because I really believe this food can be eaten by my own kids or my friends or myself. So that's how the food safety culture becomes so important. You talked about, key drivers behind food safety culture. I think there are a few that come to my mind. One of the main one is the leadership commitment in food safety culture. How invested the leadership itself is. You cannot practice what you preach. Your leadership has to be involved so deeply in that culture. They have to set the tone for the entire organization. When leaders prioritize food safety and allocate resources towards achieving the food safety and maintaining the food safety, it sends a very clear message to the entire organization. That's how important it is. And also, the other one is the communication. How you communicate across the organization your food safety standards. You cannot just have a binder of your operating procedures and then nobody reads it. That doesn't make sense. You have to communicate that through trainings, practices, visually, communicate throughout the organization. Food safety is everybody's responsibility. Things like that. And then also you empower your employees. Your employees should know that if I voice my opinion on this practice, which is not safeguarding our food safety, they should not get any punishment for that. So if they are empowered to bring that upfront, then that's a good food safety culture. Like I talked about continuous education, training, how we make sure everybody understands, and also the accountability, right? It's not just only food safety department is responsible for food safety. Everybody, every department, every employee in the company is responsible, starting from janitor to the leadership. Everybody should be responsible. They have to be accountable for food safety.
Looking to improve your supply chain? At Trustwell, we've been connecting the dots between the food industry and data for over 40 years to give you more control and visibility across the full supply chain. Our comprehensive Food Logic platform and our new Genesis Foods set a new standard for compliance, transparency, and quality across the food industry. Request a demo today. The link is in the show notes, or visit us at trustwell.com. Yeah, I think those are really great points. And I like how you started off with it has to be a belief system. Like it has to have that foundation of realness, or else, it's not going to have the adoption from all levels within the organization. So absolutely the combination of action and belief of, this is really important to us and it's important to all of us. So yeah, I think that's really great advice. And I'm sure coming from this background with fresh produce, you have even more sort of experience with this, right? Because I think there's some unique food safety risks involved. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you've encountered in this space, and how have you addressed those?
I've been fortunate enough to have worked in fresh produce industry for so many years. Like you mentioned in the intro, my career started with Earthbound Farm, which was the company that was implicated in 2006 spinach outbreak. I never knew at that time I will get a chance to work in that company, but I learned a lot in that. And then after that, several companies that I worked with, I learned quite a good information on food safety associated with produce. You asked about fresh produce comes with unique food safety risks. And what are the biggest challenges with regard to fresh produce? Fresh produce, as you say, it's ready to eat. When you have a salad in your hand, you should not have any worries whether it is safe or not. The reason mainly because fresh produce is highly susceptible for contamination. Anything that happens around it, whether it is in the field or in the processing environment, anything that happens around it can cause an issue. Mishandling, for example, in the field, there are a lot of pathogens that can come from soil or wind or any dust particles like that. So we have to have very rigorous food safety standards, whether it is in the field or in processing environment. In processing environment, for example, rigorous cleaning and sanitizing is your key. You're washing produce thoroughly, whether you're using acceptable levels of microbials, antimicrobials. Another challenge with regard to food safety is it has a very high potential of cross-contamination between different things, not just from its surrounding, but from other food products. There are a lot of food products that are multi-ingredient. So when you mix those things, You don't want any cross contamination. You have to maintain strict separation for that. And also the contamination, when I think back in the field, the pesticides and chemicals, there are a lot of chemicals that we use to prevent food safety hazards, or somebody else using somewhere else that can drift into your field, those kind of challenges. Another major one that I have encountered is the handling practice of fresh produce itself, storage and handling and during processing and all that. So those are key things.
So, how do you balance the food safety, all those protocols that you just talked about, really with the increasing consumer demand for, minimally processed, less chemicals, organic? I think from a consumer standpoint, they're looking at it going, they want all of that. And then they, of course, want to have food safety as well. So, how do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, minimally processed food have its own challenges, right? It's not every food is to be eaten, right? And there are some key measures that we can take in adopting, food safety standards for these minimally processed foods or organic foods. One of the things that comes to my mind, if it is fresh produce, keeping that same line of thought, the stringent farm practices, all right? Or how do you make sure that you stick to the regulations or you stick to the very good practices? It's especially applicable for organic production as well. You have to have established very clear science-based regulations that are tailored towards your organic products or minimally processed foods, mainly to prevent contamination, preserve the natural qualities. Say, for example, you have to use clean potable water for irrigation or washing your product, or you have to have organic pest control measures. You not use chemicals, or you have to use regulatory tests for soil pathogens and contaminants, heavy metals, for example. You need to follow those guidelines. And when it comes to processing food products, for organic products in general, you can use, if your product allows it, you can use the non-chemical based technologies such as high pressure processing or ultraviolet light that you can use to sterilize the product. In our greenhouse and also in our juice production, we use a lot of HPP, high pressure processing, and also UV treatment for our waters, right? Water can be treated with UV to minimize cross contamination. And after the harvest happens, the hygiene practice employees handle the food, how hygiene practices are being followed very strictly, cleanliness standards and avoiding cross contamination. Those are key as well. And again, use of natural antimicrobials for organic products. You don't use chemicals, but use naturally acceptable antimicrobials or things like cold plasma or edible antimicrobial proteins are there, for example. One of the key thing is also you have to follow certifications and standards. If your facility is audited by organic standards and you have follow those regulatory standards, I think you are good in that. There are many things like consumer education, clear labeling, transparent labeling, they say, and collaborate research organizations, and tailored certifications that are targeted towards organic products or minimally processed products like that. Those are some of the key things that comes to mind.
That's very helpful. And, you talked about cross contamination earlier. So, what role does sanitation play in preventing contamination? And how do you really ensure that goes across very large scale operations, which you've obviously worked with in the past?
Sanitation is such a key component. Obviously, you cannot do without sanitation, but sanitation plays a crucial role in mainly preventing contamination of food by ensuring harmful bacteria, viruses, and other pathogens do not spread onto the food. There are some key aspects when it comes to sanitation, and 4 or 5 major roles that sanitation does. You use sanitation practices for equipment cleaning, regular cleaning. You have to establish the regular cleaning. It has to be every night, or it can be every day, depending on your equipment. Regular cleaning and sanitizing your equipment and food contact surfaces. Those can prevent buildup or harmful organisms to spread. And environmental sanitation is also very important. Maintaining clean processing and handling areas, proper waste management, pest control, these are all very important to prevent contamination. Personal hygiene, employee hygiene, food handlers must practice very good hygiene practices, including, regular hand washing, wearing clean clothing, masks, those kind of things are very important, mainly to prevent, cross contamination or transfer of pathogens. And also another important thing is air and water sanitation. You have to ensure that you have clean air surrounding your food, and water that you use in washing the food or cleaning your facility should be clean as well. Those are very important things when it comes to what sanitation does.
And how do you really measure the effectiveness of those programs, especially when you've got multiple facilities?
We do a lot of metrics or measurements in our clients here, and these are very general. I think every food produce industry or food processing industry does this. What we call is a pre-op sanitation. That means before your operation starts, you have to do a pre-op inspection. We call. So usually in the night, sanitation team comes. does cleaning in whatever the number of hours they have to clean. And then our quality team comes and does a pre-op inspection. First, they do a visual inspection. They look at the food contact surfaces, equipment, and environment, whether it is visibly clean. Of course, you cannot see the microbial contamination with the naked eye. Then we utilize microbiological or ATP monitoring testing, which is a swab. You swab on the surface, and immediately within 15 to 20 seconds, you get a data that tells you how the microbial contamination is there or not, or how clean it is. You develop a threshold for that values and then make sure that you fall under that, your equipment may be clean. That's a quick way of knowing it. And again, you can do regular microbiological testing on your surfaces or the equipment, take swab and send it to the lab and do the microbial contamination. Just you can measure the total counts on that surface to see how clean it is. You can do it on periodical basis to see how your sanitation is effective or not. And then sanitation team should have a very good training. They should be following a standard sanitation operating procedures, which should be reviewed constantly and updated constantly. And one of the major component of sanitation, effective sanitation, was environmental monitoring. Your facility should be using swabs and air sampling to monitor your facility's environment for pathogens such as listeria or salmonella, right? These are main pathogens that are regularly monitored. And also you should have a validated and verified methods to ensure your sanitation is effective. You have to periodically verify if your facility, let's say, uses a particular concentration of a sanitizer, you need to validate and see whether it is effective enough for my level of contamination. And also the documentation and the audits are very important. Audits can give a check to validate your process are working good or not, but audits are not every day, but your facility should be auditing yourselves on a periodic basis as well.
I'd love to talk about regulatory compliance because it's always shifting. And you obviously have a lot of experience with this. And we just recently saw, an extension on the FSMA 204 compliance date. How do you approach regulatory compliance and how does that change as things shift?
So there have been a lot of regulatory changes since a few years now, and especially after FSMA is implemented. 204 is one of the last one in FSMA that was supposed to be implemented. I think it is extended, but it will be implemented eventually. So one of the key things everybody has to do is understand the regulation and standards first. You need to understand and stay updated on all the relevant industry regulations, the codes and certification requirement. You need to have a checklist of mandatory compliance areas that you can, fall back and keep checking your compliance on that. You should also be developing a detailed documentation of your SOPs, your training documents, your cleaning schedules, or monitoring reports. Audits rely heavily on documentation, so that is very important as well. And like I mentioned in my previous statement, is that conducting internal audits as regularly as possible, weekly, quarterly, monthly. So you need to have your own internal audits conducted and communicate to the team and tell them why we need to meet this regulatory standard. And training to the employees is very important as well. Sometimes we depend on monitoring systems that are set up to measure key metrics like temperature control, humidity control in your crossing area, microbial testing, allergen management. Those kind of things are very important as well. What we do on a periodic basis, we do mock audits where we create a scenario where actual recall is happening or a food safety issue is happening. And then we take whole team, not just quality team, but production, operations, sanitation, or everyone through that mock audit. And then everybody understands the importance of that. You should also work with industry experts that can give you more guidance on regulatory standards as well. We operate from the notion of we are audit ready every day. So you need to be ready for audit any day. In fact, we are preparing for an unannounced audit this month. So we are ready for audits every time and address your corrective action. So, promptly and thoroughly. That way it is acceptable for regulatory standards. Every company should have their own audit team who is a go-to person, more than one person in your team that understands the standards regularly and update the team regularly.
Yeah. And you're explaining just a very proactive approach, to audits, mock recalls, all of those things. What would be your advice for companies who are not actively engaged with this type of, maybe they don't have mock audits going on? How can they implement that?
So, it is very difficult to be not open to changes that are happening in the regulatory standard, not paying attention to that. If you don't pay attention, then it's going to be difficult to continue the business in that. If food is highly regulated, especially fresh produce. So you need to have someone in your organization who is looking constantly on these regulatory upgrades. And there are most companies that I work for hire a regulatory specialist as well. I work with all that. So it is also important, right, to note that customers keep us busy as well. They come up with a lot of questions and, questionnaire, survey. They ask constantly to us, hey, what are you doing with this regulation? There is this change coming, happening. What are you doing it? So it is impossible to be completely closed your eyes with the regulatory changes that are happening.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the consumers. I feel like more and more that's where a lot of this demand is coming from. And we've already talked through the regulatory, but kind of no matter what's changing out there in regulatory or industry, we're seeing that the customers are the ones that are coming to us, right? And saying, this is what we want to see in the product, which is a great way to get that pulse on what they want. And I think it's great. So let's talk about technology a little bit. I think just looking ahead, there's a lot of food supply chain technology, obviously, that's out there. We've got predictive analytics and real time monitoring and, the potentials that exist with AI. And so, what do you feel like has really changed the game in that regard? And what are you looking forward to in the future in terms of technology?
Yeah, I mean, technology changes have been there in the food industry for quite some time. It is just the depth of those technologies or the understanding level of those technologies varies. Advances in food safety technology, particularly like you mentioned, real-time monitoring and the predictive analytics have significantly transformed our approach to food safety. For example, proactive risk management, predictive analytics. There are technologies that you use that take data from the field level and like rainfall or wind and all that, attach those data to via machine learning or data modeling and link that to potential possibility of contamination risk before even they occur. So that's kind of technology. AI can help to realize those patterns in microbial test results and also environmental conditions to be able to predict contamination spikes that can happen. And then traceability is another field that has grown significantly in food industry as well. Real-time monitoring systems, integrated IoT sensors, for example, these provide continuous data on critical parameters like temperature, humidity, or microbial levels in the environment. And this allows for faster or immediate detection and response to any deviation from safety standards. And improved compliance, automated systems, for example, that give you real-time data analysis to hand. Say in our industry, we use automated dosing systems for monitoring your antimicrobial levels. Anytime there is a certain dip in the level, it will automatically dose it, and then you keep it level at that level constantly. So those kind of systems helpful as well. Now you can control your dosing systems anywhere from anywhere in the world. Now you don't really have to be in the company to be able to understand what's going on with your dosing systems. And efficient resource management. Predictive analytics also helps to optimize your resources allocation by forecasting where is the demand and identifying inefficiencies in the supply chain. And this leads to better inventory management and reduce waste environment as well. When I was in a produce company few years ago, we used the technology that when you place your product in a tray and put it into this machine, it will immediately analyze and tell you the defects in the product. Let's say, for example, you're looking at a mixed salad, mixed leaves. It will tell you which leaf is decayed or which leaf has mechanical damage. This is very helpful when you're doing faster processing and a lot of samples you're handling. This kind of technology, which is image-based technology, it can help you to understand and come to conclusion much faster. Those are some of the examples.
It's very exciting and I think a lot of implications for the future. And just going back to another thing that you had mentioned previously is about training. So, in your experience, what is the best way to maintain a food safety training program that's effective and really goes beyond just compliance with regulatory?
We do a lot of trainings in our industry, and many food industries does. We are required to have training for every employee. Ensuring training is impactful and retained involves a combination of strategies that aim for different learning styles and reinforcement over the time. Some effective methods are interactive learning, for example. You have to engage your employees through interactive methods such as simulations or role playing or hands-on activities. If you have a new instrument or new equipment to be trained on for employees, you need to take them to the floor and show them how to use this metal detection, for example, how to make sure that it is in compliance and verify that with time to time basis. And also, you cannot train a big lesson in one go. You need to have divided that into chapter by chapter. Allergen management, for example, how it should be received, how it should be managed, how it should be, released to the production, how the allergens should be cleaned if there's anything happen. So every team is different in this, and we can divide those trainings into different segments. That way it can retain. And also continuous reinforcement of this training. You cannot just say train just when they join the company and then they are done. They need to be trained on a periodic basis, what works best. And anytime that is a refresher training is needed. So we always do, whenever we find that on the floor, somebody did not follow a procedure, we do a refresher training on that, and whole team gets refresher training as well. So those are key things. And mentorship as well. When you are training a new employee, you need to have a shadow person. That way, that person is teaching that new employee very well, and then that employee understands everything clearly. Then feedback and recognition. You need to have provide feedback to the employees and say where they missed the point, and also recognition. If they do a good job, if they follow the procedure correctly, you need to recognize their achievement. And also, you need to have a positive learning culture. That continuous learning, fosters positive environment is very important.
No, those are really great tips. And kind of going full circle, because I feel like when you first talked about your story, you shared how that initial recall just influenced you, right? So, like, what can companies do when they're facing that situation? If they are in a crisis of food safety, if there is a recall, what advice do you have in those situations?
Whenever I have seen, whenever, in fact, I have faced a crisis situation in every companies I have worked, and most of the time it comes back to food safety culture and the communication around that crisis that happened. I firmly believe now is that how quickly and clearly you can communicate during a crisis is the key. That can save a lot of headache. Immediately, how soon can you respond to that crisis, and how soon you can call a team. In our organization, we have a crisis response team where everybody gets a message on their phone, email, and also we follow up with a voice call as well if there's a crisis. Because assembling that team is very important for your next step to be able to execute. And then transparency in the crisis time, you need to be open and honest about what happened, the situation, what steps will be taken to resolve it, and what are the expected outcomes. How do we resolve this? Because we need to have that information ready to provide to our customers or consumers, what have you. And then clear communication channels. You cannot say one way of communication. I saw him in the morning on the hallway and I told him that's all. No, that's not. You need to have a paper documentation. You need to make sure follow up with a call, email, text, whatever works best on that. And key thing, all this comes under the umbrella of a crisis management team. Every company has a crisis management team, should have a crisis management team that involve experts from food safety, public relations, legal matters, and all that, production, operations. All those teams should be as representative in that crisis management team because it's a collective decision during a crisis. And you need to follow your recall procedures. Have the recall procedures vetted, clearly written, ready to address a scenario. Usually whenever you do mock audits, you are dealing with a crisis in that situation. And if a crisis is not counted in your recall procedure, you need to make sure that if this happens, what are we going to do? So that's many people have recall procedure that just tells what you need to do if there is a recall and that. But you also need to have a corrective actions very clearly mentioned in that. Continuous monitoring and improvement. You need to have a continuous monitoring team who talks about how the situation and making necessary improvements is important to prevent a crisis. And consumer support is also important as well. How affected consumers are there. If a recall situation is there, how we are going to address that issue with your consumers. How do you make sure that even if there is a small complaint, you have to have a refund procedure or coupons, or what kind of advice do you give to a consumer if they're on the line asking what I should do in this situation? So those are very important steps you can take during a crisis management.
And I think that what you mentioned about transparency and openness in your communication, and especially with customers, goes such a long way in kind of bringing back that consumer trust or brand reputation that may be lost in these situations. So certainly great advice. Okay, just a couple more questions for you. So I've been asking folks this year for 2025, what is your food industry prediction? What do you think is going to be the big trend of this year?
There are a lot of things that are happening with the food industry of late, and 2025 is no new to that. Food industry is set to experience several transformative trends in 2025. I mean, some of them are continued rise in the functional foods. Functional foods like yogurts have been, probiotics, for example, have seen tremendous growth, but there is continuation of, health beneficial products People are incorporating a lot of cold pressed juice, a lot of immune boosting substances like ginger, for example, fruits, those kind of immune shots. I don't know if you've heard of immune boosting food products. Those are some on the rise, and sustainability and ethical practices are as well should be a trend for 2025. Continued trend. Actually, it is already there. One of the other thing I've seen is plant-based alternative proteins. For example, there is a lot of animal-based proteins that, like protein powders, for example. Now there is a lot of interest with plant-based proteins, and personalized nutrition is another key area I have seen. What it works for me, what my health, my body type, what is the nutrition level that I should consume. Right now, there is a standard nutrition fact, nutrition panel, and all that. But what works for us, for as an individual person, is different. So that can be a key change as well. 2025 and beyond. Innovative flavors and formulas, those are also coming up in this year. I've seen a lot of enhanced food safety and traceability technologies that are coming, like I mentioned, about how the traceability can be adjusted with things like ERP, your enterprise resource program, or your traceability softwares. Those are going to see a lot of changes with 2025.
Great call outs. I guess I just have one more question for you, which is really, if you had a parting advice for food safety professionals today, how can they make the biggest impact in their organizations and within the industry?
Yeah, I mean, there are several things that people should do. What has worked for me is try your best to stay informed and educated. Do your trainings like SQF or HACCP or PCQI. Those are very important trainings in food safety. You need to be informed about regulatory changes that are happening around you, and leverage technologies like AI, machine learning, blockchain in your traceability area. So you need to leverage those technologies to put your best foot forward in terms of understanding food safety or challenges to that. Promote culture of food safety is also very important in food industry. You need to foster a culture where food safety is a shared responsibility, not just one person's. And collaborate across various departments. That helps me a lot. Many times when I'm stuck with that, I go down and talk to production or maintenance team or sanitation team and see what's happening and how do we resolve this. That helps a lot. Collaborating with growers, with your suppliers, also very important. Focus on sustainability. Yeah, it's no brainer. It's everybody's responsibility as well. And traceability, like I mentioned a few times already. Engaging with consumers has helped me a lot as well. And I learn from others who lead by example, who also follow what they say. Those are some of the messages I can give.
That's awesome advice coming from a veteran of many decades in the industry. So thank you so much, Dinesh, for joining us and talking through a lot of these topics that are really important and sharing your knowledge with us. And really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much, Lydia. It was great talking to you as well.
Thank you for joining us for another bite-sized nugget of Food Tech Talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork. Make sure to subscribe. And if you love the podcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Trustwell and request your free demo of our technology platform that connects food formulation, products, nutrition analysis, and compliant labeling with traceability, recall readiness, and supply chain transparency, please visit us at www.trustwell.com and click Get Started or click the link in the show notes to learn more. Thanks for listening.